When thinking about what sources an author uses to make their claims or to demonstrate what they're trying to prove, it might be important to ask, where is this author drawing this information from? So, are sources used? Whether that's in a book, whether that's on the internet, what sources are they drawing their information from? Is it just biblical references, which doesn't mean that's a bad thing, or is there no references at all, so it appears like it's just this person's thoughts on a particular topic? If there are sources, are they credible sources? Is this individual pulling from the type of sources you would want to pull from? Journal articles, commentaries. So are those sources reliable? Are those sources up to date? Now, up to date sources aren't a kind of line in the sand saying, oh, you've got to use the most recent sources. I mean, there's some things that, questions have been settled decades ago, and so there hasn't really been much written since the 1950s or the 1960s. But if you're going through and you're trying to find sources, if you found some sources and you see, there's been a lot of work done in the early 2000s on this subject, and you pull up a website and all their sightings from the 1940s, this source might not be that useful to me because there's been a lot of work done since then. Are the sources that are being used scholarly sources or popular sources? When this author is trying to make their claims about something, are they using sources that would be people with credentials or expertise, or are they using sources that are more popular level? Again, all of this stuff doesn't necessarily discredit the source you're looking at, but it is something that may or may not kind of lead you to questions and things, especially the credibility of sources. Right? So if you are going through your research and you discovered there was a line of thinking about something, and that's totally been discredited, and then you find a source that's using that discredited information, probably not something you want to spend a lot of time on, right? Because it's not credible information. In thinking about websites as sources or connected with sources, there are a couple of things to pay attention to. First of all is thinking about what's the domain of the website I'm pulling this from. This may or may not tell you anything about the credibility of the information, but it does help you, again, start off with that question. Is it an educational website? Is it a governmental website? Or is it a commercial or organizational website? Simply because it's a commercial or organizational website doesn't necessarily mean it's bad or good, but you might, almost hate to say this, but you might trust a governmental website a little bit more than you would just a .com website. You might trust a little bit more an EDU website than a .com website. That doesn't mean, however, that you can't find things on the EDU website that might not be useful either. Is it someone's personal page, or is it a page of an organization? And so if you're looking up something on biblical studies, and you find something that is on the SBL's website, the Society of Biblical Literature. Well, that's an academic scholarly society on biblical studies. You might pay more of attention to that than just somebody's personal webpage. Why? Well, because part of the ideas behind the SBL is they're trying to present themselves as a credible scholarly organization, so the information they put out on their website, they're going to try and maintain that credibility, those kinds of things. Is it an educational website? Is it a nonprofit organization? Again, if it's an organization that is a for-profit company, that doesn't necessarily mean it's bad information, but they might be trying to promote a view that is going to get them, is going to get them better business. So, for example, if you were doing a project, not that you would do this for this class, but if you were doing a project on GMOs and whether GMO genetically modified organisms related to fruits and vegetables were healthy or not. If you go to, let's say, Monsanto's website, which is one of these big conglomerations that's heavily involved in the GMO production, they're going to have information that is going to try and convince you that GMOs are fine. Why? Because they're in business to do that. That doesn't mean it's true or false, but it does mean you have to kind of say, okay, you really have to prove to me that this is true because you have some vested interest in this particular issue. It's also important to think about, is this a blog post? You can find scholarly blogs where when you look at the credentials, right, this is a scholar. This is somebody who teaches at a university. This is somebody who has published on this topic widely. But they also have their own personal blog. May or may not be useful because a lot of scholars who have blogs will talk about things they're researching, talk about things they're interested in, but often these are just kind of half-formed thoughts, beginning steps in a project, that they wouldn't necessarily want you to be citing as absolute evidence. Right? And so there would be a difference between a scholar's blog post and the same scholar's peer-reviewed journal in an academic journal, right? An article in an academic journal. Right? And so kind of taking a look at, all right, what type of website is this? Is this a website saying, here's the latest scholarship of this particular field, or is this, I've been working on this project and here's some of my thoughts. Could be some interesting things, but as far as a source, might not be something that would be useful. What questions do you have? What can I explain more clearly? It's important to think about the audience as well. Who is the audience? Who is the individual trying to target? Are they trying to target a general audience, or are they trying to target a specific audience? Are they writing for the expert or the non-expert? And are they using jargon? Jargon might be something that would be useful to you. Or might suggest that the source would be useful to you, but it might not be something that would be useful either. Again, if you determine that it's a popular level site or a popular level source, no matter how you found it, right, it may or may not be useful to you. So it doesn't mean to throw it away or accept it uncritically. It means you critically investigate. And so thinking through some of those things that we've already talked about are important. Finally, as far as criteria, one of the things to think about has to do with the question of accuracy. Does this source provide accurate information? Are the things that they say true, reliable, consistent with other information that you found? Is there some means for you to determine whether that information is accurate or not? So there might be some information on the website, but it doesn't really give you information on how you determine whether that's accurate or not. Well, what might be some of those things? Well, things like sources, right? It cites its sources. Links to other websites. Like if somebody's talking about, let's say, a scientific, scientific information, do they have links to other places where you could determine, okay, they're doing this accurately? Or are they assuming, or are they encouraging you to assume that because they've said it, it's accurate? Is it slanted information? Is the person trying to present information objectively, or are they presenting a one-sided position? They are not fairly treating the issue. There are different ways that can be handled, and so it's important to recognize that some sources or some information is going to be what's known as propaganda. Propaganda is information provided by an interested person or a body of people that is usually one-sided or incomplete. Usually it is related to a controversial cause. And so the information is very supportive of a controversial cause or very condemnatory of a controversial cause. Often the information is set up in a moral type of way. And so if you believe this is immoral. Now scholarship can be propaganda. And so just because a scholar has written it, or just because you found it in an academic journal, doesn't mean it isn't propaganda. But that's one thing to keep in mind. Is it propaganda? Is it what we might call misinformation? Misinformation refers to inaccurate information, but it's not due to any sort of malice or intention. Somebody just had their facts wrong. Right? Things that are urban legends might fall as misinformation. The people conveying it aren't intending to deceive. The thing that goes around Facebook every year, every couple months about you got to post this or your information is going to become public tomorrow. No matter how many times news sites say, it's a hoax, it's a hoax, it's a hoax. Right? We're seeing now, everybody posting on Facebook, I'm not allowing people to make my information public and all these other kind of things. Are people doing it to deceive? No, they're just misinformed. However, some people, unfortunately, intentionally put out false information. So you have to think about what's the agenda behind this piece, who's writing it, what might they try to be doing here. So the key thing here is approaching with what we might call hermeneutics of suspicion. Meaning, I'm going to be suspicious of information until I'm convinced that it's accurate. So when you're in doubt about something related to a source, then doubt. Right? Until they've proven the case to you. And if you can't verify something, at least take it tentatively. Right? Don't wholesale adopt it, but at least say, okay, this might be true. So, okay, I'm going to take this for right now, but be very careful in thinking about some of that information and not just kind of accepting it wholeheartedly. What questions do you have about evaluating sources? One last thing to think about when it comes to evaluating sources is thinking about how you found it. Did you find this source through somebody who's trustworthy? hopefully, right, when you're working on a paper for a class, you can ask the faculty member teaching the class, you can talk to a librarian, and they're going to point you in the right direction. Was it a source that was cited in another article or book? And so we talked about that a little bit on Monday about bibliography mining. Was it something you found in a database, like we talked about on Monday? That too is important to consider as well, as how did I come across this? Because again, that doesn't say 100% you're safe, but it does say, okay, I can maybe feel a little bit more reliable about this source than perhaps other sources or other ways I've discovered sources.